Today's subject is especially surrounding performance leadership. It's the culture, customer connection, answering the question why customer experience is an inside job. For this, we have two very special guests. Some of you might know the people presenting and reflecting today. First of all, we have got Pierre-Yves Robert. He is the co-founder and managing partner of the Culture Architects. He's an accomplished C-suite leader, non-executive director, and business coach with extensive experience across South Africa and the UK. He specializes in organizational culture, strategic alignment, transformation, and sustainable growth for startups, especially, but also for scale-ups and established multiple enterprises. Pierre-Yves has served on multiple boards, including as chair, strengthening governance and decision-making frameworks. He's also a tutor at Business School Netherlands, supporting leadership and strategic management development. Passionate about people and culture, he helps organizations to build collaborative teams and drive meaningful, lasting change. You might know the reflector of today, that's George Woods, Dr. George Woods. He's the CEO of the Culture Architects, thinking C-suite executive and organizational transformation strategist, with over 30 years of cross-sector leadership across financial services, healthcare, social enterprise, and humanitarian organizations. He has led major strategic, cultural, and operational change initiatives for global institutions, including HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Ernst & Young, Netbank, and St. John's Ambulance. His work focuses on building high-performance cultures, enabling organizational resilience, and driving sustainable growth. Dr. Woods also lectures in leadership and strategies and serves as an academic tutor at Business School Netherlands. He actively contributes to social impact through board service and leadership mentoring across the UK and Africa. Welcome both. Very special thanks for you to be present on this show. I'm looking forward to your presentation, and without any delay, I would like to ask Pierre-Yves to start his presentation.
Thank you, Tuan, for that very warm welcome. It's exciting to be joining another one of these Goodmorning BSN sessions, and lovely as always to be accompanied by George. Usually he's in the driving seat, so this is a new experience for me. And yes, as the title of the presentation says, we're going to be talking about customer experience today and unpacking a little bit more about why this is really a very much leadership and organizational culture driven imperative in any organization, or it should be rather. So let's dive in. Quick disclaimer, I've probably crammed too much information into these slides, so I'm going to try and focus on the more critical parts of it, and happy to share a copy of this in the chat before we sign off for anyone who wants a copy to be able to refer back to it. So without further ado, let's soldier on. So I think a good way to start this is to pose a question to the participants or anyone who's joining, and think about a really great customer experience that you had, and conversely, what is the worst customer experience that you've ever had? And think about what was actually different about those organizations. Very often we will think that it comes down to the price of the product, the features, the technology, etc. And almost without exception, the evidence points somewhere else entirely. And what we want to talk about is really that customer experience should not be the domain of just the customer support department. It's not a program, it's not just a singular touch point, and that it is actually fundamentally a downstream output of organizational culture, which means that customer experience is fundamentally an inside job. It's driven by leadership. It's not just a customer service department responsibility. And we're just going to quickly talk about a little bit about the evidence to support that and talk about some of the cultural levers and leadership elements that drive that experience. Now, what's really, really shocking is that in the 2024 Forrester's US Customer Index research report, they found that customer experience quality is at its lowest level since 2016. And this is despite continuing investment in customer experience technology, things like journey mapping, ongoing training programs. And most CX investment is basically aimed at the wrong layer of the organization. Only 3% of brands in the Forrester report are considered to be truly customer focused. And the 2025 report shows that there's been a further decline in these metrics, which I think is really quite alarming. US consumers, to quote directly from the report, are having on average the worst experience in a decade. Brands want to create better experience, and they realize that putting the customer at the center of their business is the way to do it. But it's basically that organizations struggle with the scale of that change. So firms that are customer obsessed grow revenue, profit, and customer loyalty faster than their competitors. There's a lot of evidence over 4 decades, and we're jumping into the Wayback Machine here and going all the way back to 1994 to an HBR research paper that was published by Heskett, Sasser, and Schlesinger. And they talk about the service profit chain. This has been validated by other researchers as well. And in the copy of the presentation that I'll share with you, I've got all the list of references and sources so that you can dive into those at your leisure, because they're quite chunky papers. But essentially, the first element here that we're talking about is internal culture. Employee satisfaction and retention drive high service quality. Essentially, the internal experience of staff, your employees, determines the external experience of customers. Higher service quality drives customer satisfaction and loyalty. And in terms of business performance, 5% improvement in customer loyalty increases profits by up to 85%. So profit is really the output of culture. It's not a separate concern from it. This is at a high level some of the papers that I've referenced. I think the most compelling one here, excuse me, is the Gallup Q12 meta-analysis, because this covers research. Excuse me, hold on a second. This covers research across over 100,000 business units, and I think at last telling, well over 1 million survey respondents, and this is over many decades, shows that employee engagement produces statistically significant improvements in customer satisfaction. There are a whole host of other ones. I've already referenced the Forrester study. The 2025 report indicates that more or less 2x increased revenue growth in companies that prioritize employee experience. There's also a McKinsey paper that supports this. And a lot of it is, I suppose, rooted in the concept of psychological safety. And I'm sure that many of you will have come across Amy Edmondson's research that also was supported by a fairly extensive research project at Google.
Yeah, you muted yourself.
Okay, sorry, is that better?
That's better.
Right, we've already covered this metric. So how do customers, your clients, experience a broken culture in terms of customer experience? Well, where employees feel safe to raise concerns, exercise judgment, customers experience a confident, empowered service, where employees are empowered and given latitude to make decisions. Empowered staff resolve issues at first contact. Disempowered staff create the sense that they are being passed around. And I'm sure that we've all had this experience where your concern is constantly being escalated to a more senior manager, for example, because said person either doesn't have the ability or the authority to resolve your issue. So you end up being caught in this long chain of customer support conversations, if we can even call them that. Metrics and incentives are obviously a very good one to focus on here. I'm sure we're all very familiar with the speed of resolution is a very common metric. How many tickets can a customer support representative resolve in a day? You don't really feel like you've been given the time and care and attention or empathy in raising the issue. And then there's this values behavior coherence where a brand may have certain stated values, but you don't, as a customer, experience that at all. So there are two really different cultures that we're talking about here. A culture of fear as opposed to a culture of trust, and how that impacts you or how you as a customer experience that. Internally, and this is where the psychological safety element comes in, staff hide mistakes, avoid decisions, adhere rigidly to a script. And again, we've all probably experienced that. Customers experience this defensiveness, this sense that you as the customer are perhaps being unreasonable. You didn't read the terms and conditions. Well, this is what our policy says, etc. As opposed to a culture of trust where staff are allowed to act on judgment in the moment. There is an acknowledgement that you're not always going to get it right, but it's treated as a learning experience. Customers experience the whole tone of that conversation is very different from a customer perspective. You feel like you're being treated more empathetically. And the Ritz-Carlton Group and the Four Seasons thinking about customer-facing environments, I don't think we can get a better example than hospitality, where there isn't time to escalate something to a senior manager. And the Ritz-Carlton Group and Four Seasons invest heavily in training and empowering their staff to act in the moment. And they have a tremendously loyal customer base. Those are just two examples. So to link this back to the leadership pillars, culture is just, it's not just about performance. We need to think about this as a leading indicator. Profit is the lagging indicator. Typically, we track churn rates. We have net promoter score surveys that we send out to customers, for example. We evaluate performance from your CX team, as I said earlier, in terms of how many calls were handled in a day, how many tickets were resolved in the moment. In all likelihood, that doesn't really solve the problem. And it certainly doesn't imbue or cultivate that customer loyalty that we're talking about. So essentially what you measure signals what you value. If you measure speed and volume only, that's what you get. You do not get care, loyalty. certainly don't get customer advocacy, which is probably the most valuable form of promotion and marketing that you could ever hope to get. That's like gold dust for anyone who works in marketing. Referenced Gallup's study already. We've spoken about the service profit chain. But essentially, the traditional CX performance matrix or dashboard tracks leading indicators. The lagging indicators. The leading indicators would be, let's rather measure psychological safety. Let's measure empowerment. Let's measure what our values are. How do our employees actually translate that or communicate that to our customers? And that all ultimately comes down to how do we align the performance metrics. From a responsible leadership perspective, we need to be thinking about every customer interaction at some level being an ethical act. You cannot build a culture that treats customers well while treating your employees poorly. That becomes very evident. Responsible leadership produces dignified customer interactions as a natural byproduct. If we think about a bank that says, we are here for you, but then charges extortionate fees for your most vulnerable customers, there's an immediate disconnect there. There's definitely not going to be a sense that you're feeling supported and taken care of. So CX is a issue of responsible leadership, not only a commercial one. And the culture that produces the best customer experiences are also those that treat their people with the most dignity. Practical implication: if you want to improve customer experience, look first at what your employees experience. The investment is the same, and the research bears that out in terms of increased profitability. Interesting enough as well, I think it was the McKinsey research that showed you also, over a period of 2 to 3 years, get up to 20% reduction in costs. So what should leaders do? Model the right behavior. So if you want staff to listen to your customers, listen to your staff. Appreciate the incredible value that your immediately customer-facing employees have to offer. They gather a lot of insights from your customers. What are you actually doing with that? Do you respect the feedback that your frontline staff feedback up the chain, if you even encourage it? Align measurement with intent. So if you say you value your customer relationship, stop measuring your customer service staff on transaction speed alone. The metrics will win every time. We know this. Build safety and empower deliberately. This is exactly what the Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, Southwest Airlines, these are exemplars of where they have created that very deliberate organizational culture that allows employees to make frontline decisions that resolve customer queries or customer complaints in the moment. So listen to the voice of the customer. If you're not already doing this, commission or use existing data to understand where the gap exists. Where is it widest? So organizations that improve customer experience sustainably are those where uncomfortable customer truths reach the people with the power to change them. So I started working on an adapted CX maturity diagnostic that covers basically 5 maturity stages, and it works across 6 cultural dimensions. I've got 2 slides following this that we can take a look at very briefly because we don't have the time to go into it in an awful lot of detail, but you will see it in the copy that I will share. But essentially, we go from stage 1 being accidental, and stage 5 being adaptive. adaptive in the sense that you're constantly interrogating the metrics that you use and asking the question, is this metric still serving us? Is it leading to the right behaviors? Does it empower our team to resolve these issues? And the cultural dimensions, leadership modeling, psychological safety, empowerment, and decision latitude, the metrics and incentives that values behavior coherence and custom understanding / gathering custom insights, for example. So very quickly to go through some of these, let me just collapse my video screen here so I can see what I'm looking at. But for example, if we're talking about leadership modeling, in stage 1, if you're simply accidental, your behavior contradicts stated values, customer experience is delegated downward, it's not owned at the leadership level. Whereas it's at its most highly evolved stage, being stage 5, adaptive, modeling shifts in real time, taught and reinforced through the leadership pipeline. So it basically becomes part of your leadership performance evaluation structure. If we look at it from a customer understanding point of view, for example, at the accidental stage, decisions are driven by internal assumptions. There's no systematic customer insight. There's very, very little engagement, direct engagement with customers. At the adaptive level, you're continuously evolving channels. Uncomfortable truths are actively sought. So there's a very intentional engagement with insights from your customer base. So some closing questions, just so that George has some time to do some reflection. If we asked your frontline staff what is rewarded in your organization and we asked your customers what they experience, would those two answers be consistent? Something to think about. When was the last time you as a leader removed an obstacle that was preventing your staff from doing right by a customer? It's likely if you cannot name a recent example, your culture is probably producing the wrong experience, regardless of what your strategy says. And then finally, if your CX function disappeared overnight, would your customers notice within a day or within a week? In all likelihood, your CX is held together by a department and it's not produced by the culture, the overall organizational culture. I've sometimes facilitated sessions on customer centricity and taking an ideal design perspective on it. I like to throw out the provocation to the group and say, how do you, in an ideal world, in any business, you would not need to have a customer support department because your customer insights would be so deeply woven and integrated into your product development, and everyone across the entire organization, right through to your finance department, would always be intimately and first of all thinking about what is this going to do to our customer experience. So in conclusion, customer experience is not designed in a lab. It is produced every day by the culture that you have built, whether deliberately or by accident. And leaders who understand this stop trying to fix CX from the outside and start building it from the inside. And I think that is it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pierre-Yves. Let's switch over to George Woods immediately. That's time to begin.
Thank you, Pierre. Thanks, it's one. There is always some deep nuggets of wisdom, and so grateful for that. Just to say, I'm in a fairly noisy environment, so hopefully you can hear me. My first reflection would be that customer experience is a leadership responsibility. And this made me reflect, Pierre, on how organizations often invest heavily in customer-facing solutions while neglecting the internal cultural factors. And that determines service quality. So thank you. I think that was nugget number one. The second gold nugget, as it were, is the importance of psychological safety. And I think you brought that to life in your presentation. And this resonates strongly with contemporary leadership theories. And I was particularly pleased that you drew on Amy Edmonton's work on psychological safety. And reflecting my own experience, I've often observed situations where employees are reluctant to challenge decisions or report issues, resulting in problems escalating and negatively affecting service delivery. And in fact, more recently, in work that we've done with the National Health Service, a culture of kindness in an operating theatre has proven to have better outcomes for both the doctors and the patients. But where there's a culture of fear, you can have a propensity to cause harm. And so, just thought that was quite helpful reflection as well. And then organizational culture as a leading indicator. This certainly challenged my personal previous tendency to focus on performance outcomes rather than the conditions that produce them. And so it highlights the importance of measuring factors such as employee engagement, trust, empowerment, and alignment with organizational values. A fourth nugget, metrics shape behavior. And I thought that was quite insightful. What you measure says a lot about what you value. And how many organizations actually track culture as a key measurement. And the work we've done before, Pierre, the work we've done together, you can measure culture and you can measure the outcomes of positive and or negative culture. And so thank you for bringing that to life. And then the fifth reflection was just the gap between values and behavior. And this prompted me to consider how organizational credibility is built not through mission statements, but through consistent actions. Whether we think it or not, we have organizational culture. It's simply a case of reflecting on what kind of organizational culture you have and how that displays in behavior. And then I particularly liked your empowerment requires authority and real authority, and for staff to be able to make those decisions, to operate in psychological safety, which is that very first key element that you drew out. And then finally, I think just the idea that customer experience is an ethical issue. And I think that perspective broadens the discussion beyond profitability. It implies that responsible leadership creates environments where dignity, respect, care are experienced by both your customers and your employees. And when we talk about brand coherence, what you say versus what's experienced is really, really important. So thank you.
Thank you, George. Great show again. Now it's time for you all participants. We've got quite a lot, so probably can't answer all the questions, but if you've got a question, just put it down in the chat room. That's behind the button on the bottom of your screen, and I will read them out for George and Pierre-Yves to answer. And the first question already came in from Charlotte, and she's asking, how could any business take a first step to shift culture gently? Perhaps one of you can answer that.
Go for it, Pierre. So I think, sorry, why would it be both answering? So I think it begins by proper diagnosis. It begins by understanding the organizational culture, but it also goes to what mission and purpose do you have as an organization? What's at the center of what drives you? And when that is about a healthy, functioning ecosystem of good culture experience and good staff experience, and a true diagnosis of what your current culture is like, I think that's your starting point. Pierre, maybe you have some thoughts as well.
Well, in terms of process, I think, George, you're correct. But I would take a step back from that and say there needs to be an initial conversation that at a leadership level, you acknowledge that there is a problem and that the culture you have, whatever that is, whatever that it looks like, is not what you want. And I think often, and it goes back to the whole performance metrics that we were just talking about, a lot of it is driven by having a very transactional relationship with both your employees and your customers. And I think that is a very, very fundamental shift that people need to make before you can even begin to address any cultural change. And I think if you're not able to make that transition, it's very difficult to change the culture. It was not impossible, but I think that's the first step, fundamentally.
Thank you so much. I've got a question from an anonymous participant. That's always dangerous, but I'm going to try to read it out. The question is, where you work in climes where customers don't pay as when due, sometimes delayed for months, but demand an experience. How do you keep the culture, team, and stakeholders happy? Did you understand that question?
So I suppose
I'm interested in George's response to this.
So I suppose there's elements of, again, what you measure is what you value. And so there's something about systems thinking here, isn't there, Pierre, where you do need to address the customer experience all the way through the value chain. But at the same time, culture needs to be one of those key enablers. And I think that's that balance that you're looking for there.
Yeah, in this sort of situation, I guess it would be interesting to ask or to understand a little bit more about the industry, or that, the person who's asking the question is referring to. It's obviously a lot easier in a subscription-based SaaS environment to deal with the payment issue. But I think it's also comes down to, and what I've often seen is there is often a drive by the finance team or the leadership team to drive sales, which leads to bad selling, because your sales team is now, again, it's a metrics thing. We have to build pipeline, we have to close deals. It's easy to close the deal. The difficulty is in retaining the client. You have to make sure that you've sold the right product to the right person. And if you're having to do a whole lot of hard selling, the likelihood is that customer either can't afford your product, the product is not right, and they will churn, or they won't pay. So I think you have to look at your sales process or the sales philosophy. Again, are we being transactional? Are we being short-term? Or are we thinking about building a customer relationship over a longer period of time? And that is by far, in the short term, that's a painful decision, because sometimes you say, we're not the right fit. So we don't think we should be transacting. And so you maybe close less deals, but you'll end up with better quality deals. And that's about building a good customer relationship.
Yeah. Well, great answers. Next questions comes from Omalara. And the question is, culture rights on ethics. If ethics are not addressed, how do we have a consensus ethical business-consumer relationship? How do we explain or address this? Difficult question again, but...
Sorry, could you read the question again?
Okay. Culture rights on ethics. If ethics are not addressed, how do we have a conscientious ethics business-to-consumer relationship? How do we explain or address this?
So I think it does start with the values of the organization and being intentional about those values. And I think, Pierre, you addressed it in as much as values on a board, but not coherent experience, creates disharmony within an organization, because it's not a coherent experience. So there's a definitive, we make a decision to be ethical as an organization, and therefore our interactions right through the organization are ethical, and it is one of our values. And you intentionally engineer the organization around those values. And again, it goes to that idea of systems thinking.
Yeah. Well, and use a different example, but my test is almost and I can't remember where I read this, it should be as easy to divorce yourself, to get divorced, as it is to, get together, thinking from a client service provider perspective. So in the world of SaaS, for example, it's very, very easy to sign up for a new SaaS product, right? Not always so easy to unsubscribe. And I think that is unethical. And I don't think that that is a way to build a long-term relationship. It could be that in this moment in time, I no longer need this product or I can't afford it, but I would like to come back to it. But if you make me jump through hoops to stop paying, I'm never coming back to you. So not only is it unethical, but I also just think it's just poor financial practice.
Interesting next question from Joop van Nierop. What is your opinion on organizations that have customer questions answered by AI robots or AI bots?
Yeah, it is an interesting one. I think it depends on the design of the AI technology. I don't always love it, but if it's a relatively simple issue that I'm trying to resolve, I'm quite happy to engage with an AI chatbot if it helps me solve my problem at that moment in time and it speaks to me in a human voice. For more complicated issues, then I want a simple way to escalate my question and be able to engage with someone in real time. And that could be on a web chat or it could be on a call. It doesn't really matter. I just want my problem answered. But again, it's less about the channel that's being used. It's less about the technology. It's more about, can I solve my problem and not feel like I'm being passed from pillar to post, really.
Great answer. And also the final answer, because we've gone through our time. There were some more questions in the chat room and also in the Q&A section, but it's about time we stop and go back to what we are normally doing during daily working life. Great show. Thank you so much again, Pierre-Yves and George. Please hang on a minute so we can evaluate on the session. Next week, we're going to have a great session again. I hope to see all of you back. Same time, same place, Tuesday morning, starting sharply at 9:30. That is Central European time. Next week, we have a great speaker again. It's Dr. Princess Eugene. He's the founder and group managing director of the GMYT group. And his topic is all about change leadership, addressing from vision to institution, leading change through structure, innovation, and sustainable impact. So a very interesting topic next week. Thank you for now. Have a great day and hope to see you again next week.